Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Makakadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of the millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's topic, I wanted to read through a bit of an account of one of the kings of Judah and showing you the importance of not just rulership, but also righteous rulership, the importance of the ways of the Heavenly Father being implemented and actually being administered, right? And shows you how much that changes the way of the conduct of the people, right? Just like in contrast, you see in this society, you will see the essentially the fruits thereof. Yahushua said, a tree is known by its fruits. So we see the way the people conduct themselves in this culture, in this society, is strongly a reflection of the policies, of the ways, the practices they indulge in, they put forth, they're essentially their policies, right? Because it's essentially what's going on is, excuse my French, but it's shit rolling downhill, right? It started from somewhere, right? Because the ways that the people, they behave themselves, including our people, is a strong reflection of the ways that come from above, right? Because we see more and more time again, we start to see a lot more where those ways are being practiced. They're not being talked about as openly, but things are essentially being exposed, but whether it be through politicians, whether it be through celebrities, the higher ups, their abominable, filthy ways, or even elites too, their abominable, filthy ways are essentially being made known. And they're essentially, what's going on is there is a light that's being cast on, right? So the point really is that, there are, the it's important that righteous rulership essentially it starts from above, right? And the ways of the Heavenly Father is actually implemented because those ways are not practiced in this place, right? So I wanted to read through this account here because essentially what's happening in this society as well is a seduction of the filthy practices. So let me just read this here. Let's see. This is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26, and it says that the righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduceth them, right? So what happens is, being around these different heathens, and worshiping and them paying homage to their idols and their gods and so on and so forth, their practices, their culture, so-called culture, becomes a snare onto our people, and essentially it makes them more abominable, where we're supposed to be essentially upright, we're supposed to be holy, we're supposed to be separate, right? So let me go through this account here. I'm just going to read a bit of the chapter and just showing you some of the things that he did, and understanding, essentially that administering of righteousness really has to start from above, right? So this is going into the king Jehoshaphat, right? And I want to read a little bit of this in Chronicles, and I sincerely hope that this lesson will be edifying, right? So this is Second Chronicles chapter 17, verse 1, and it says, "And the Jehoshaphat, the son, his son, reigned in his stead." I believe the king before him was Asa, if I'm not mistaken. And it says, "And he strengthened himself against Israel, and he placed forces in the fenced cities of Judah, and set garrisons in the land of Judah, and in cities of Ephraim, which Asa his father had taken," right? So Asa was his father, right? And the Lord Yahweh was with Jehoshaphat, because he walked in his first ways of his father David, and sought not after Baalim, right? So he wasn't going after the ways essentially of the heathen, right? Because what comes with these heathen gods is these abominable gods is filthy practices, and practices that don't make you that practices essentially what they make you profane. They make you unholy, right? They make you a degenerate, right? The scriptures say that we were created to be a noble vine, right, and a holy and a right seed. But you start to see more and more why those ways. People might think of it as a light thing to set up a Christmas tree inside of their house, but those ways are not conducive to life, right? There's more practical, better ways to actually be using a tree, right? So the point is, let me continue. It says, and the Lord Yahweh was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in his ways, his father David, and sought not after Baalim, right? So essentially, he was chaste. The word chaste, when you go into it in the etymology, refers to somebody who is pure, right? And this is how, as Israelite men, we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be consulting with all these different abominable practices. As a matter of fact, let me get what Paul said. This is really very, very important. This is that 2 Corinthians 11. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2, and it says, for I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to a Mashiach, but I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through the subtlety, so your mind should not be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Hamashiach Yahushai, right? So that shows one thing, that the fruit that they ate wasn't actual fruit, because and that also proves that there were philosophies, right? Because essentially, Eve's mind became corrupted as well as Adam's mind became corrupted, right? And that shows, like I just read, like I said before, that wasn't actual fruit, right? So that cuts that notion, that belief, right? So this is the mind frame that we as Israelites were supposed to be. We're not supposed to be beguiled by all these different philosophies. It was the same rhetoric, and when you go into Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, those different ites, those different nations, Hamitic nations, we weren't supposed to take on, their ways and their customs, because why? We are holy, right? So going back here, this is verse 4, and it says, but sought the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai of his father, and walked in the way in his commandments, and not after the doings of Israel. Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought to Jehoshaphat presents, and he had riches and honor in abundance, and his heart was lifted up in the ways of the Lord. Moreover, he took away the high places and groves of Judah, right? So, there were probably moments where they were going off, and they weren't supposed to be doing those things. So what did he do? He did something very similar. When you go into King Josiah's story, it was very much the same thing, right? When they found the books of the laws of Moses, right? He took away a lot of those different gods and so on and so forth, and started to do essentially like a reformation program where those different abominable practices, they were taken away, right? Because that's not how we're supposed to be, right? So this is Deuteronomy 16 verse 21, and it says, thou shalt not plant thee a grove of any trees near unto the altar of the Lord thy power, which thou shalt make thee, neither shalt thou set thee up any image which the Lord thy power hateth, right? So different gods, they're required to go deep into the bush or something like that. Like, think of it in a sense like when how you call these people? I think it's called Bohemian Grove, if I'm not mistaken. That mindset happened a lot more in the ancient times, where they're doing their abominable practices out, not out in the open, but out in the forest, right? So, but we're not supposed to be worshiping these other idols, right? And it says, so back in Second Chronicles, chapter 17, verse 7, and it says, also in the third year of his reign, he sent to his princes, even Benel and Obadiah, and to Zechariah and Nathaniel, and to Micaiah, to teach in the cities of Judah. And it says, and with them he sent Levites, with Shemaiah and Nethaniah and Zebediah and Asahel and Shemaiah, and it says, and Jehonathan and Adonijah and Tobijah and Tobadonijah, Levites, and with them Elishama and Jehoram, priests. And they taught in Judah, and had the book of the law of the Lord with them, and went about throughout the cities of Judah, and taught the people. And the fear of the Lord was upon all the kingdoms of the lands that were about Judah, so that they made no war against Jehoshaphat. So essentially, now when it comes to the Levites, they were also, they had certain responsibilities, right? So the priests, what they will do is they had to be able to, they perform certain they perform sacrifices. They would burn incense. But one of the things that they also did was to be able to teach our people the law, right? So those were one of so those were some of the roles of the priests, because the Levites, at this time, they did not essentially receive a physical portion of the land. Like, so when we went into the land during the time of Joshua, right, and the different tribes received different portions of the land. Now, the only tribe that did not receive that was the tribe of Levi, right? Their duty, their burden, their inheritance, you could say it like that, was to basically administer the priest office, right? So performing sacrifices, like I said, grain offerings, peace offerings, burnt offerings. And our people also had to be taught the importance of things were clean and unclean, right? So this is where the priests essentially would come in, right? So you start to see, okay, now he has the priest essentially teaching the people the importance of the law, and what things to do and things not to do. Because imagine when you parallel it with this society, for example, you don't have that. I don't want to say you don't have that. You actually do have it through the servants, the prophets. The prophets are really the ones that are actually, in the spirit of priests, to teach our people the importance of right and wrong, and the importance of clean and unclean, holy and profane, so on and so forth, right? Now, but it should be a widely implemented thing when you think about it, because our people don't understand. They don't understand the importance of the law. They don't understand, and they think of it as the scriptures talk about how the commandments are not grievous. Our people see it as a grievous thing to actually adhere to the ways of the Heavenly Father, right? Because really and truly, the ways of the Heavenly Father are higher than our ways, and they're higher than the ways of these different heathens. Let's just put it like that, point blank, period, right? The ways of the Heavenly Father is really teaching us why proper governance and proper rulership, under Yahushua and King David, is really just the solution to this, society as a whole. That's what the world really and truly needs, right? Because we start to see the fruits thereof. Yahushua said that a tree is known by its fruits. The word fruit refers to, what's it called? The Greek word there is karpos, which means works and deeds. And we start to see the deeds thereof, For example, you have what's it called? What was it? Bioengineered meat, cloned meat. That was a recent thing that was passed in Canada, and they don't have to label it. You start to see a drying up of the soil. The soil essentially is weaker, it's malnourished, different diseases, people eat pork, you know what I'm saying? So, like, there's so many different examples of showing you why righteous rulership is really and truly needed, right? So, let's go to Sirach. As a matter of fact, let me go to Leviticus, then I'll go to Sirach to show you the importance of the roles of the priest. This is Leviticus chapter 10, verse 10, and it says that ye may put difference between holy and unholy, and between clean and unclean, and that ye may teach the children of Israel all the statutes which the Lord hath spoken unto them by the hand of Moses. Right. So this was one of the duties of a priest. The priests were instructed and responsible to teach our people the things that are displeasing versus the things that are pleasing to the Lord, right? The things that are holy and the things that are unholy. So, okay, so I wanted to get a point in regards to what's it called? Essentially righteous rulership, and showing you the importance of that and what Jehoshaphat's actually commanding the priests to actually administer to make sure these things get actually done. So this is Sirach chapter 10 verse 1, and it says, "And a wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. As the judge of the people is himself, and so are his officers. And what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all that dwell therein." Right? So it trickles down because the judge is conducting himself as a wise individual. And what does it mean to actually be wise? It means to actually have a healthy fear of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. That's the first step to actually having wisdom, right? And you start to see that vibration of him being well conducted, well dressed, I could say it like that, not in a physical sense, and him administering that same vibration, those same policies, those same what do you call those things? Essentially policies, and that vibe gets trickled down onto the servants. It gets trickled down to the different people who holds different positions of office, right? They're essentially in accordance, they're in a congruence, they're on the same page, right? I'll read verse 2 again, and it says, "As the judge of the people is himself, and so are his officers. And what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all that dwell therein." So this is the vibe of what King Jehoshaphat's actually doing here. Now, when you read the third verse, it actually goes into the way Esau destroys his own people. He doesn't take care of them. He's a niggard. He doesn't pay them. He doesn't. He rips the people off. This is so much. It's just a long tally list of showing you why you're supposed to be ruled over not only your own kin, but ruled over somebody who's righteous, right? So this is going back here. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 17 verse 11. And it says, "And also some of the Philistines brought Jehoshaphat presents and tribute silver And the Arabians brought him flocks, 7,000, and 7,000 rams, and 7,700 he goats. And Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities in store. And he had much business in the cities of Judah, and men of war, mighty men of valor, were in Jerusalem. And these are the numbers of them according to the house of their fathers: of Judah, the captain of thousands, Adnah the chief, and with him, mighty men of valor, 300,000. Right. So not only that, he not only had the people in righteous arrangement, he also had the heathens in subjection. They were bringing him gifts. They were bringing him tributes, right? Kind of like in this society, what you have is, you pay tribute to Caesars, right? Rome had a very similar mind state. I don't want to say mind state. Had a framework, essentially. I could say it like that, where you had vassals, and vassals are pretty much smaller. I don't want to say they weren't governed by themselves, but they were like separate states where they would essentially pay tribute to the head state. You could put it like that. They were states that were in subjection to a higher power, so to speak, right? So Rome had a very similar framework of how they actually functioned, right? So this is what's actually, just to get an idea of what's actually going on here, right? And when you have wisdom, you're able to actually use the resources properly. So now you have, what does he have here? Let me just go back to it. He has silver, he has flocks, so that's a booming economy right there, right? So you can use those different flocks, you can shear them, make wool, spindle it. You have women that might spindle it, on some, like a spindle, and it becomes like more like a thread, right? To be able to make things that warm, when things get a little bit colder, right? You need people to be able to shear them. You need shepherds to actually look over these different flocks. So what does this do? It creates a booming economy, right? You're able to now employ your own people to perform different duties and different tasks to do certain things, right? Or, because he's in rulership, you get the other heathens to do so, right? And then you set them over taskmasters. So you might have, different taskmasters watching over, a set of 10 or 15, 50, or 100, whatever it is, right? To be able to, making sure that they perform certain duties, right? Because he's in a position of rulership, right? So this is what our people don't understand. They try to acquire the physical substance without acquiring the spiritual substance, right? The scriptures say that wisdom really is the principal thing, and get wisdom, with all that get understanding, right? And another problem I've noticed with our people is that they will try and acquire the physical things, in order to circumvent the lack of spiritual things and the things that they don't have, right? So for example, they will use, okay, maybe I might have a business, or maybe I might have mortgages, some, what's it called, real estate, so on and so forth, right? And they will use it as a way to, okay, kind of feel like they're more successful, so to speak, like they're, making or trying to acquire a piece of the pie of the American dream or whatever, right? And they still lack substance. They still lack spiritual substance, right? They don't know how to manage it, right? They might have a sense of a worldly knowledge of how to be able to handle those different affairs, but they still realize that they're still lacking because they don't have that connection to the Heavenly Father through His Son, right? And this is what Jehoshaphat had. He has that instructions, he has that relationship. He's walking in the ways that the Lord instructed him to do, right? And you start to see the riches, started to compound, right? The heathens were behaving very, very differently, with him, because the scriptures also talk about when you please the Lord, the enemies, he maketh your enemies to be at peace with you, right? So it's a lot more than, the physical riches, right? But the riches are really are truly supposed to start on the inside and rather than the outside, right? This is why people are still lacking in different areas of their own lives, because they might have the physical, but they don't actually have the spiritual. This is why you always hear stories and rappers, of our people. They might go broke, they don't know what to do with it. They get caught up with, whether it was with Esau or whatever, inheritance, because, if you neglected wisdom, I'm sorry, if you applied wisdom or had wisdom, you would know, what to do with it. And you know that, okay, this money that I have is just not, it's not actual real money, right? It's not backed by anything of intrinsic value. So what you're reading here, what he acquired as tribute from these other nations is something of intrinsic value, right? The silver, he has the flocks, right? These are things, the he goats, these are things of intrinsic value, right? So let me go to, okay, I start at 11 or 12. Okay, let me go to, let's go back to Deuteronomy 17. This is Deuteronomy 17, verse 14, and it says, when thou come unto the land which the Lord Yahweh thy power giveth thee, thou shalt possess it and dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, as all the other nations that are about me. Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord Yahweh shall choose, one from among thy brethren, so your own kin. Thou shalt set over thee, thou mayest not set over a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother, right? So, you're not supposed to have these other heathens ruling over you. Why? Because they don't have the mind of the Lord, right? Donald Trump does not have the mind of the Lord. He's not keeping and practicing the ways of the Heavenly Father. Joe Biden, same thing. All these different people. Emmanuel Macron, the same thing. Vladimir Putin, same thing, right? Verse 16, and it says, and he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses, for as much as the Lord hath said unto you, he shall henceforth return no more that way. I'm sorry. It says, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, and that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver and gold, because what does that do? It strongly, you start to become corrupt. All right, you start to make it more about you, right, rather than understanding that you're essentially a steward, right, to be able to serve unto the people as well, right? But you start to see the fruits thereof in this captivity of what people do when they get those positions. They start to do the complete opposite. They start to pocket the tax money, a lot of scandals, right? All these different, because they don't have the mind of the Lord. They don't have the fear of the Heavenly Father, right? And it shall be, verse 18, and he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, he shall write him a copy of this law in the book, out of that which before the priests, the Levites, and shall be unto him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, and he may learn, to fear the Lord his power, and keep the words of this law and these statutes, and to do them, right? So we start to see that, and he's just one example, and Jehoshaphat is really one example. King Solomon, yes, he multiplied wives, which is not a transgression, but where he went off was building high places for their gods as opposed to worshiping the Lord, right? So that it was one of the mistakes that he made as somebody who was in rulership. Because remember, he still did right in moments because he was one of the things he prayed for was wisdom, right? So I guess I'll end it off there, but just to as an example to show the importance of righteous rulership, right? And to show you how much, the people, need to be taught and instructed in righteousness, and even the heathens also. When you read Isaiah, the 2nd chapter, they also need to be taught because their abominable ways are abominable. Their filthy practices are filthy, right? They are not conducive to life, right? So this is why they need to be taught instructions and proper righteous conduct, right? So I'll leave the lesson there, but Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.